Airport security in 2026 is more strictly enforced than at any previous point in aviation history. CT scanning deployed at major international airports produces three-dimensional bag images identifying prohibited items with accuracy that makes hoping security misses something genuinely obsolete. These 12 rules apply right now across the US, UK, Canada, and Australia. Some will surprise you. Stay until number 1, because that rule catches more experienced travelers than any other on this list. Rule number 12. The 3-1-1 liquids rule is stricter than you remember. The liquids rule has changed. Airports are enforcing it more aggressively than ever. 2 decades of familiarity with the 3-1-1 rule have created a widespread assumption that travelers understand it completely. In 2026, that assumption is generating confiscations and delays at rates suggesting the rule is both less understood and more strictly enforced than most travelers appreciate. All liquids, gels, aerosols, creams, and pastes must be in containers of 3.4 ounces or 100 milliliters or less, all fitting within one transparent, resealable, quart-sized bag per passenger, removed separately at the checkpoint. But here's the twist. The definition of liquids is broader than most travelers apply. Peanut butter is a liquid. Hummus is a liquid. Soft cheeses, shammi, honey, jam, yogurt, and salad dressing all classify as liquids under current TSA enforcement. Solid foods, including hard cheeses and sandwiches, pass freely. Officers apply these classifications consistently regardless of whether travelers find them logical. What most people don't realize is that duty-free liquids purchased after clearing security require specific handling at U.S. connecting checkpoints. They must remain in sealed, tamper-evident bags with the receipt visible. Removing items from that sealed bag at any point risks confiscation at your next checkpoint, regardless of where the purchase was made. And this is where it gets crazy. CT scanning, now deployed at over 200 U.S. airports, identifies liquids through opaque containers and packed clothing with accuracy that older X-ray technology couldn't approach. The era of a full liquid container going undetected because it was buried in clothing is permanently over. Rule number 11, power banks must go in carry-on, not checked baggage. Checking your power bank could get your entire bag pulled from the flight. Loose lithium batteries, including power banks, spare laptop batteries, and spare camera batteries, are prohibited in checked baggage entirely. They must travel in carry-on where passengers and crew can monitor them. Power banks are also subject to watt-hour limits most travelers have never checked, under 100 watt-hours permitted without approval. Between 100 and 160 watt-hours requires advance airline approval. Above 160 watt-hours, prohibited everywhere on commercial flights. But here's the twist. Devices with non-removable batteries, including laptops and smartphones, can travel in either carry-on or checked baggage when installed in the device. The restriction applies specifically to spare or loose batteries not installed in equipment. Smart luggage with integrated non-removable batteries is banned from checked baggage by most major airlines. Meaning, gate-checking your roller bag at boarding could trigger a packing emergency if that battery can't be removed. What most people don't realize is that this is enforced through X-ray screening of checked baggage before loading. Bags containing prohibited loose batteries are pulled from the aircraft, potentially causing significant delays depending on how far through the loading process your bag is when discovered. Knowing this rule before you pack eliminates a delay category that catches thousands of travelers annually. Rule number 10. Medications require specific declaration procedures. Undeclared medical items trigger extended screening that misses flights. Solid medications travel in carry-on in any quantity without restriction and don't require removal from bags. Liquid medications, including insulin, eye drops, and liquid antibiotics, are exempt from the 3.4-ounce restriction in medically necessary quantities, but must be declared separately at the checkpoint and presented proactively. Declaring them up front produces significantly faster processing than waiting for officers to identify them during screening. But here's the twist. Medical devices, including CPAP machines and nebulizers, must be removed from carry-on bags and screened separately at every checkpoint, regardless of scanning technology available. These cannot be screened inside a bag, even at CT-equipped checkpoints. Failing to remove them triggers a full bag search that proactive removal completely prevents. What most people don't realize is that travelers with implanted devices, including pacemakers and metal joint replacements, should carry their device identification card and declare the implant before entering screening equipment. This triggers alternative screening procedures, avoiding potential device interference, and typically produces faster processing than proceeding through standard equipment and triggering an alarm requiring secondary screening afterward. And this is where it gets crazy. Undeclared medical liquids discovered during screening are treated identically to standard liquid violations until separately assessed. Travelers who pack medical liquids without declaring them lose the medical exemption benefit entirely during the time-pressured checkpoint interaction. Proactive declaration is worth more at security than any amount of post-confiscation explanation. Rule number 9. Sharp objects. Rules are more nuanced than banned or allowed. Some sharp objects are permitted in carry-on. Most travelers don't know which ones. Scissors with blades shorter than 4 inches from pivot to tip are permitted in carry-on. Most travel scissors and small craft scissors fall within this limit. Scissors exceeding 4 inches must be checked. Disposable razors with permanently enclosed blade cartridges are permitted. Loose razor blades are prohibited. Safety razor handles can travel in carry-on. Spare blades must be checked. Straight razors are prohibited regardless of packaging. But here's the twist. Knitting needles, crochet hooks, and fishing rods fitting within overhead bin dimensions are currently permitted under TSA rules. Traveling with plastic or wooden knitting needles rather than metal ones reduces the likelihood of discretionary officer prohibition, since individual officers retain authority to restrict items appearing threatening in specific context. What most people don't realize is that tools, including screwdrivers and wrenches shorter than 7 inches, are permitted in carry-on. Multi-tools without knife blades are generally permitted within size limits. Multi-tools with knife blades are prohibited regardless of blade length. The blade's presence, not its size, determines prohibition, and this is where it gets crazy. These nuances catch experienced travelers most frequently because general prohibition assumptions prevent them from checking current specific rules before packing. The traveler who knows scissors are sometimes okay, but doesn't know the 4-inch threshold is exactly the traveler losing permitted scissors at security through 1 minute of avoidable ignorance. Rule number 8. Food items face more restrictions than most travelers expect. The food you packed for the flight might not make it through security. Solid foods are generally permitted through domestic U.S. security without quantity restriction. The problem arises with items classified as liquids, spreads, dips, and semi-solid foods, generating frequent confiscations because travelers didn't realize their food fell under liquid classification. On international routes, food faces destination country biosecurity restrictions entirely separate from departure security rules. But here's the twist. Australia and New Zealand impose the world's strictest biosecurity requirements, prohibiting fresh fruit, vegetables, and meat regardless of whether those items cleared departure security without issue. Food that passes TSA in Los Angeles can be confiscated and fined at Sydney for biosecurity violations having nothing to do with aviation security. Departure airport clearance creates a false sense of security against destination country biosecurity rules that apply completely independently. What most people don't realize is that ice packs used to keep food cold are permitted when completely frozen solid. The same pack in a partially melted state where gel flows freely is classified as a liquid subject to the 3.4-ounce limit. Officers assess gel pack state visually at the checkpoint. Travelers relying on packs that may partially melt during transit to the airport are gambling with a confiscation that proper pre-departure freezing entirely prevents. Rule number 7. Sporting. Equipment rules. surprise even frequent travelers. Sporting items you assumed were fine in carry-on have a prohibited list that surprises everyone. Baseball bats, cricket bats, hockey sticks, golf clubs, ski poles, and lacrosse sticks are all prohibited in carry-on regardless of size. These are prohibited based on impact weapon classification, meaning a child's plastic baseball bat falls under identical prohibition to a full-size aluminum one. Travelers who previously carried small versions without issue are encountering stricter 2026 enforcement reflecting the written rule, rather than the checkpoint discretion that previously allowed exceptions to pass. This completely changes everything when you realize that yoga mats, resistance bands, jump ropes, and foam rollers are all permitted in carry-on without any restriction whatsoever. The assumption that all fitness equipment requires checked baggage overcorrects from sporting equipment prohibition awareness into unnecessary inconvenience. These items generate zero security concerns and pass through without special presentation. But here's the twist. Martial arts weapons, including nunchucks, throwing stars, and brass knuckles, are prohibited in both carry-on and checked baggage on U.S. domestic flights simultaneously. This is one of the few categories where items are prohibited from checked baggage as well as the cabin. Travelers transporting martial arts equipment for legitimate competition must verify specific item rules rather than assuming checked baggage always provides an alternative pathway. What most people don't realize is that fishing rods are permitted in carry-on when they fit within overhead bin dimensions without protruding into the aisle. A rod that fits is permitted. A rod requiring protrusion is not, with the distinction made at the gate rather than security, meaning a rod that cleared the checkpoint can still be denied at boarding if gate agents assess it as non-fitting. Plan the rod's dimensions against your specific aircraft's overhead bin before travel. Rule number 6. Carry-on size and weight rules are being enforced more strictly than ever. Airlines are measuring bags at the gate. Charges for oversized ones are significant. Carry-on size enforcement has historically been inconsistent enough that oversized bags regularly traveled without consequence. In 2026, that inconsistency is being systematically eliminated through sizer frames at check-in counters and gates across major hub airports in the US, UK, Canada, and Australia. Standard U.S. carrier allowances permit approximately 22 by 14 by 9 inches, including wheels and handles. International carriers frequently maintain smaller allowances depending on cabin class. But here's the twist. Basic economy fares on most major carriers now restrict carry-on to personal item only, eliminating overhead bin allowance for the lowest fare tier. Gate charges for carry-on bags on basic economy tickets average $65 to $100 per segment, substantially exceeding advanced checked baggage fees. Travelers purchasing basic economy expecting standard carry-on allowance are discovering the restriction at the gate where the financial consequences are immediate and non-negotiable. What most people don't realize is that sizer frames are calibrated to interior bin dimensions rather than published size specifications. Bags meeting published maximum dimensions can still fail the physical sizer test if wheels, handles, or external pockets create protrusions pushing the bag beyond the frame's opening, with gate-checked fees applied without exception regardless of published dimension compliance. And this is where it gets crazy. Airlines are deploying AI-assisted gate monitoring, identifying oversized carry-on bags from camera footage before passengers reach the gate agent. This technology is expanding rapidly across major hub airports in 2026, making inconsistent enforcement that experienced travelers previously relied upon genuinely and permanently obsolete as a carry-on strategy. Rule number 5. Alcohol carry-on rules have 2 separate regulatory layers. Alcohol in carry-on is permitted, within rules most travelers have never read carefully. Miniature 50 milliliter bottles fall below the 100 milliliter threshold and travel in your quart-sized liquids bag alongside toiletries. Full-size bottles exceeding 100 milliliters must be checked or purchased after security at duty-free. Alcohol above 70%. ABV is prohibited in both carry-on and checked. Baggage entirely. Standard commercial spirits, typically ranging 37 to 50% ABV, can be checked in quantities up to 5 liters per passenger in original retail packaging. But here's the twist. The FAA regulation most travelers don't know prohibits consuming personal alcohol on board regardless of where it was purchased. Consuming miniature bottles brought from home or purchased at duty-free is a federal aviation regulation violation that cabin crew must enforce. The bottles travel legally. They cannot legally be consumed during flight unless served by the airline's own beverage service, a distinction that surprises travelers who assumed purchasing made consuming permitted. What most people don't realize is that duty-free alcohol in sealed, tamper-evident bags is subject to confiscation at U.S. connecting checkpoints after international arrivals. The exemption protecting duty-free purchases through some international connections does not apply to U.S. domestic connections after clearing customs, meaning alcohol protected through the international portion of your journey can be confiscated at your domestic connection security checkpoint regardless of the sealed bag's intact condition. Rule number 4. Self-defense items face complete carry-on prohibition. Everyday items you carry for personal safety are completely prohibited in carry-on. Pepper spray and mace are prohibited in carry-on entirely. They may be checked in containers not exceeding 4 fluid ounces with safety mechanisms preventing accidental discharge. But individual airline policies sometimes restrict this further. Travelers who carry pepper spray in everyday bags and transfer those bags to carry-on without removing it are among the most frequent sources of checkpoint confrontations in this category across every major airport system. But here's the twist. Personal alarms emitting loud sounds when activated are permitted in carry-on without restriction. For travelers carrying self-defense items, primarily for deterrent purposes, personal alarms provide a fully security-compliant alternative, traveling freely through every checkpoint without declaration or special presentation, eliminating both the confiscation risk and the checked baggage requirements simultaneously. What most people don't realize is that stun guns and tasers are permitted in checked baggage with batteries removed. But traveling to destinations where possession is illegal creates legal exposure that aviation security compliance does nothing to prevent. Verifying destination jurisdiction legality before packing these devices prevents legal problems beginning after the flight rather than at the security checkpoint. Rule number 3. Electronics rules. At international checkpoints differ from domestic U.S. The electronics rules at international airports are stricter than what TSA enforces domestically. Laptop removal requirements eliminated at U.S. pre-check lanes and CT-equipped standard checkpoints remain enforced at many international airports, reflecting local civil aviation authority requirements that haven't universally adopted the U.S. approach. International airports in the UK, European Union, Middle East, and Asia frequently maintain laptop removal requirements regardless of scanning technology deployed. But here's the twist. Large tablets, e-readers, and portable gaming consoles are subject to removal requirements at some international checkpoints where they wouldn't require removal domestically. The threshold for what constitutes a large electronic device varies by checkpoint and country, making the conservative approach of being prepared to remove all electronics larger than a smartphone the most reliable strategy for minimizing delay at unfamiliar international security points. What most people don't realize is that the UK updated its liquids policy in 2024 to permit liquids above 100 milliliters at airports with CT scanning installed, a significant departure from the rule maintained since 2006. However, implementation has been inconsistent across UK airports as CT equipment rollout continues. The applicable rule at your specific UK departure airport depends on whether that specific terminal has completed its CT scanner installation. meaning checking your departure airport's current published policy before travel is essential rather than optional. Rule number 2, alcohol declaration rules for international arrivals. Catch returning travelers. Bringing alcohol home from abroad has declaration rules most returning travelers ignore. Personal duty-free exemptions for alcohol returning to your home country are more limited than most travelers assume and more actively enforced at arrival customs than departure security. U.S. residents returning from abroad may bring 1 liter of alcohol duty-free per person aged 21 or over. Additional quantities may be brought back subject to customs duty and applicable state alcohol import restrictions, but must be declared on your customs form regardless of quantity. But here's the twist. State alcohol import laws in the U.S. apply independently of federal customs duty obligations. Several U.S. states restrict or prohibit importing alcohol purchased abroad beyond the federal duty-free allowance, regardless of whether federal customs duty has been paid. Travelers returning through states with restrictive alcohol import laws face state-level enforcement that federal customs compliance doesn't satisfy or override. What most people don't realize is that the value of alcohol purchased abroad counts toward your overall personal duty-free exemption of $800 per returning U.S. resident. A $200 bottle of wine reduces the remaining exemption available for other purchased goods by $200, meaning travelers who maximize duty-free alcohol allowances may inadvertently exceed their total goods exemption through combined purchases that each individually seem within limits. Rule number 1. Declaration requirements for valuable carry-on items. Protect you, but only if you know them. The carry-on rule most experienced travelers ignore until they lose thousands of dollars. This sits at number 1 not because it's most commonly violated, but because its financial consequences are the most devastating of any rule on this list. When you travel internationally carrying high-value personal items, jewelry, watches, cameras, professional equipment, customs authorities at your return destination have no automatic way to distinguish between items you owned before departure and items purchased abroad subject to import duties. A $5,000 camera carried to Europe for photography and carried home again can be assessed for import duty by customs officers with no documentation proving it left your home country with you. That assessment is legal, enforceable, and financially significant, and it happens to travelers carrying items they've owned for years simply because they never created the documentation proving prior ownership and departure from their home country. But here's the twist. The solution is free and takes 10 minutes. U.S. Customs and Border Protection's Certificate of Registration, CBP Form 4457, allows travelers to register high-value items before international departure, creating documented proof those items left the U.S. with you. Equivalent registration systems operate through UKH-MRC, Canada Border Services, and the Australian Border Force. One pre-departure visit to the airport customs office creates protection applying to every subsequent international trip with those same registered items. What most people don't realize is that alternative documentation, including original purchase receipts, insurance appraisals, and credit card records, can substitute for formal registration, but only when physically carried during travel. Travelers who can produce a pre-departure purchase receipt showing the item was acquired in their home country have substantially equivalent protection, but only if that documentation is in their carry-on rather than filed at home, where it cannot be presented at the customs checkpoint when questions arise. And this is where it gets crazy. The travelers most frequently affected are experienced international travelers who carry the same high-value equipment trip after trip without registering it. 9 trips without incident create false confidence that the 10th will proceed identically. Customs officer discretion has protected most travelers most of the time, but discretion is not a right. A duty assessment on a $10,000 professional camera kit or a luxury watch is significant enough that 10 minutes at a customs desk before departure is one of the highest return on time investments any international traveler can make. Register your valuable items. Keep the documentation in your carry-on. Do it once and travel with complete confidence on every international flight afterward. 12 carry-on rules actively enforced at airports right now. Every one. Capable of derailing your trip before you reach the gate. If this video saved your next journey, subscribe to Expert Traveler. We publish the travel knowledge airports and airlines keep buried every week. Next video, 12 checked baggage rules catching travelers completely off guard in 2026. You'll want that one before your next departure.